There comes a moment, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet. A moment where you realize something uncomfortable. You've been everywhere, except where it matters most. Inside your own life. You've been watching, comparing, reacting, scrolling, explaining, proving, performing, but not building. And that realization doesn't feel exciting. It feels heavy, because deep down, you know something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You didn't lose your potential. You misplaced your focus. And here's the truth that changes everything. The life you want is not blocked. It's unfocused. In this audiobook, The Skill That Makes You Unstoppable, you're going to step into a different kind of journey, not one that teaches you how to chase more, but one that teaches you how to return to yourself. Because focusing on yourself is not isolation, it is alignment, it is clarity, it is power. We are going to walk through 25 chapters together, chapter by chapter, layer by layer, rebuilding something most people never fully develop. Your attention, your discipline, your emotional control, your internal direction. You will learn how to protect your energy in a world that constantly tries to take it. How to stop leaking focus into things that don't build your future. How to become so centered that distractions lose their power over you. And let me be clear, this is not about becoming perfect. This is not about motivation. And this is definitely not about becoming someone else. This is about becoming someone you can rely on. Because here is the line I want you to remember. The line that will follow you through every chapter of this audiobook. An unstoppable life is built by a person who finally stops abandoning themselves. Read that again in your mind. Feel it. Because everything changes the moment you stop leaving yourself behind. Now, before we go deeper, understand this. This audiobook is educational and reflective. It is not financial advice, not medical advice, not life shortcuts. It is a mirror. And what you choose to do with what you see, that part is yours. So if at any point something hits you, if a sentence feels uncomfortably true, don't ignore it. That's not coincidence. That's awareness knocking. And awareness is where power begins. Now ask yourself something honestly. When was the last time you gave your full attention to your own life? Not your job, not your phone, not other people's expectations, but you, your growth, your direction, your habits, your truth. If you hesitate to answer, that hesitation is your answer. Because most people don't have a focus problem. They have an avoidance habit. They stay busy so they don't have to face themselves. They stay distracted so they don't have to decide. They stay reactive so they don't have to take control. But today, something shifts. Today is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. And that starts with Chapter 1, the awakening. Not the loud kind, the real kind. The kind where you stop pretending everything is fine and start telling yourself the truth. Because the truth is simple. You've been taught to give everything outward. Your time, your attention, your energy, your validation. And somewhere along the way, you stopped investing those things where they matter most, into yourself. And no one teaches you how dangerous that is, because when you stop focusing on yourself, you don't just pause your growth, you slowly disconnect from your own direction. You wake up, but not with purpose. You move, but not with clarity. You act, but not with intention. And over time, life starts feeling heavy, confusing, stagnant, not because you're incapable, but because you're unfocused. And here's the part that most people avoid. It's not the world doing that to you. It's you allowing it. That's not blame. That's power. Because if it's you, it means you can change it right now, not tomorrow. Not when things calm down, not when you feel ready, now. Because the moment you reclaim your focus, everything begins to reorganize. Your thoughts get clearer, your decisions get sharper, your energy becomes intentional. You stop reacting and you start directing. And that is where control begins. But here's the challenge. Focusing on yourself sounds simple until you try it. Because the moment you try, you notice something uncomfortable. Your mind resists it. It looks for distractions. It reaches for noise. It pulls you back into habits. Because focus is not just a decision, it's a skill. And like any skill, it requires training, consistency, awareness. That's why most people fail at it. Not because they don't want it, but because they never learned how to hold it. And that's exactly what we're building here, step by step, layer by layer, starting with something most people skip. Self-awareness, because before you can focus your life, you have to see your life clearly. And that's where Chapter 2 begins. But before we step into that, pause for a second, take a breath, and ask yourself one more question. What would your life look like if you gave yourself the same attention you give everything else? Let that question sit. Because the answer, that's where your next level lives. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. And now we move forward. Chapter 2, the mirror you avoid. Because the hardest place to look is inward. Most people say they want to improve. They say they want more discipline, more clarity, more success. But when it comes time to actually look at themselves honestly, they hesitate, they delay, they distract. Because self-awareness is not comfortable. It doesn't applaud you. It doesn't entertain you. It confronts you. And that's why most people avoid it. You see, it's easy to say, I want a better life. It's much harder to ask, what in my current behavior is preventing that life? That question requires honesty, real honesty. Not the kind you show others, the kind you admit when no one is watching. Because here's the truth most people never fully accept. You are not stuck because life is against you. You are stuck because parts of you are unexamined, patterns you repeat, habits you justify, distractions you protect. And until you see them clearly, you will keep living inside them. This is where your power begins, not in changing everything at once, but in finally seeing everything as it is. So let's slow this down. Let's get real for a moment. Where is your energy going every day? Not where you say it's going. Where is it actually going? How much time do you spend scrolling, comparing, overthinking, replaying conversations, waiting for motivation, avoiding decisions? Be honest. Because your life is not built by your intentions. It is built by your patterns. And patterns don't lie. They show you exactly who you are becoming, not who you wish to be, not who you plan to be, who you are becoming right now. That realization can feel heavy, but don't run from it, because this is not where you lose power. This is where you gain it. Awareness is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to change, permission to redirect, permission to rebuild. But only if you accept what you see. Now, here's something deeper. Most people don't lack discipline. They lack clarity. They don't know what truly matters to them. So they give attention to everything And when everything matters, nothing actually does. That's how distraction wins, not by force, but by confusion. So you must get clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you want. Clear about what no longer deserves your time. And that clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from observing honestly. Start noticing your reactions. What triggers you? What drains you? What excites you? What do you avoid even though you know it matters? These are not random details. These are signals. Your life is constantly showing you where your focus is broken. But most people ignore those signals. They scroll past them. They drown them in noise. They silence them with comfort. But you're not here to do that anymore. You're here to see. Because the moment you see clearly, you can act precisely. And precision changes everything. Think about this. If you knew exactly what was holding you back, wouldn't your path forward become simpler, not easier, but clearer? And clarity removes hesitation. Clarity builds momentum. Clarity creates direction. That's why self-awareness is not optional. It is foundational. Without it, you are guessing. With it, you are directing. And the difference between those two is the difference between drifting and building. Now let's go even deeper. There is a version of you, not in the future, but hidden in your current habits. A version shaped by what you repeat daily. If your habits are distracted, that version becomes scattered. If your habits are intentional, that version becomes powerful. So the real question is not, who do I want to become? The real question is, what are my daily actions turning me into? Because every scroll, every delay, every excuse, every decision, they are votes. Votes for the person you are becoming. And most people don't realize they are voting against themselves. Quietly, consistently, every day. But now you see it. Now you feel it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's your advantage. That's your turning point. So here's what I want you to do right now. Not later. Not after this audiobook. Right now. Take a mental snapshot of your life, your routines, your thoughts, your behaviors, and ask yourself one simple question. If I continue like this for the next year, where will I end up? Sit with that. Because that answer, that's your truth. And truth is not always comfortable, but it is always useful because it gives you something most people never have. Direction. Now here's the shift. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to become perfect overnight. You just need to start paying attention. Because attention is where change begins, where focus goes, energy flows, and where energy flows, your life grows. So if your energy has been scattered, your life has been scattered. But if you begin to gather that energy, focus it, direct it, everything begins to align slowly, quietly, powerfully. And that leads us to the next step. Because once you see your patterns, you'll have to decide something, what stays and what goes. Because focus is not just about what you do, it's about what you remove. And most people are holding on to things that are silently draining their future. That's where chapter 3 begins, the discipline of elimination. Because becoming unstoppable is not about adding more. It's about cutting what weakens you. And most people are not ready for what that requires, but you are. Because you've already started. You've already seen what others refuse to look at. And that changes everything. So take a breath, because what comes next will ask you to let go of more than you expect. Dear viewer, we would really be grateful if you could share your ideas on how we can improve our videos in the comments. Thank you very much. Chapter 3. The Discipline of Elimination. Most people think growth comes from adding. More habits, more routines, more goals, more strategies. But that's not how transformation actually begins. It begins with removal. Because you don't become unstoppable by stacking more on top of a distracted life. You become unstoppable by removing what keeps you weak. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because elimination requires honesty. And more than that, it requires courage. You see, it's easy to add something new. It feels productive. It feels like progress. But cutting something out, that feels like loss. Even when that thing is hurting you. Even when that habit is slowing you down. Even when that distraction is quietly stealing your life. And that's the trap. People hold on to what's familiar, even when it's damaging. Because it's comfortable. Because it's easy. Because it doesn't require confrontation. But focus, real focus, demands confrontation. It asks you to look at your life and say, this stays, this goes, and then act on it. No negotiation, no delay, no excuses. Now let's be real. There are things in your life right now that are draining your energy, not loudly, not obviously, quietly, consistently, every single day. It could be habits, scrolling without purpose, watching instead of doing, starting things you never finish. It could be environments, people who don't challenge you, conversations that go nowhere, spaces that don't support your growth. It could be internal patterns, overthinking, doubt, constant comparison, waiting for the right moment. And here's the truth most people avoid. You already know what needs to go. You've felt it, that subtle discomfort, that quiet voice, that moment where you think, this isn't helping me. But instead of acting on it, you ignore it, you justify it, you delay it, because elimination is hard. It forces you to let go of versions of yourself, old habits, old identities, old comfort zones. And letting go of those feels like stepping into uncertainty. But here's what you need to understand. You are not losing anything valuable. You are creating space. Space for clarity, space for discipline, space for growth. Because your life cannot expand if it's already full of things that don't serve you. Think of your attention like a container. Every distraction fills it. Every unnecessary habit takes up space. Every meaningless activity drains capacity. And then you wonder why you feel overwhelmed, why you feel stuck, why you feel like you don't have time. It's not because you lack time. It's because your attention is overcrowded. And until you clear that space, nothing new will truly take root. So this is where you take control, not by doing more, but by deciding what no longer belongs. Start small, but start honestly. What is one habit you know is wasting your time? Be specific. Not, I use my phone too much. That's vague. That's easy to ignore. Be precise. When I wake up, I spend 45 minutes scrolling before doing anything meaningful. That's real. That's actionable. That's something you can change. Now ask yourself, why are you doing it? Is it boredom, avoidance, comfort, escaping responsibility? Because every distraction serves a purpose, even if that purpose is holding you back. And once you understand the purpose, you can replace it, not remove and leave a void. Remove and redirect. That's how elimination becomes transformation. You don't just stop a habit. You replace it with something that builds you. Instead of scrolling, you read. Instead of delaying, you start. Instead of consuming, you create. And at first, it feels uncomfortable because your brain is used to ease, used to stimulation, used to instant rewards. But over time, something shifts. You start to feel different, clearer, calmer, more in control, because you are no longer reacting, you are choosing. And that is power. Now let's go deeper. Elimination is not just about habits, it's about identity. Because the person you are today is shaped by what you tolerate. If you tolerate distraction, you become distracted. If you tolerate inconsistency, you become unreliable. If you tolerate excuses, you become stagnant. But the moment you stop tolerating those things, your identity begins to change. You become someone who protects their time, someone who values their focus, someone who chooses growth over comfort. And that shift, that internal shift, is what makes you unstoppable. Not motivation, not inspiration, identity. Because when your identity changes, your actions follow naturally. You don't have to force discipline. You become disciplined. You don't have to chase focus. You live focused, and everything starts with elimination. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. You can't keep everything. You can't keep every habit, every routine, every relationship, every comfort, and still expect to grow. Growth requires trade-offs. It requires sacrifice. It requires saying no to things that feel easy, so you can say yes to things that matter. And that's where most people hesitate. They want change without letting go. They want results without discomfort. But that's not how it works. And deep down, you already know that. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. Because part of you is ready. Ready to stop pretending. Ready to stop delaying. Ready to take control. So here's your moment. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, what is one thing you will eliminate starting today? Not 5 things. Not a complete overhaul. One. One clear decision, one clear action, and commit to it. Because discipline doesn't start with big moves. It starts with small, consistent decisions. And those decisions stack. They build momentum. They reshape identity. They create a new standard. And once that standard is set, everything changes. Because now, you're not someone who tries to focus. You're someone who protects it. And that leads us to the next level. Because once you eliminate distractions, you are left with something powerful, silence. And most people are afraid of it. Because silence reveals everything. Your thoughts, your fears, your truth. And that's where chapter 4 begins. The power of being alone with yourself. Because if you cannot sit with yourself, you will always run from your potential. Take a breath. Because this next chapter will show you something most people never experience. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city or at least which country you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 4. The power of being alone with yourself. There is a reason most people keep noise around them at all times. Music, notifications, videos, endless conversations, not because they enjoy it that much, but because silence is uncomfortable. Silence removes distraction. Silence removes escape. Silence removes the ability to run. And when all of that disappears, there you are, face to face with yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your unfinished decisions, your avoided truths. And for most people, that moment feels heavy because they are not used to being alone with themselves. They are used to being entertained, stimulated, occupied, but never still, never present, never fully aware. And here's the problem. If you cannot sit with yourself, you cannot understand yourself. And if you cannot understand yourself, you cannot direct your life. That's why solitude is not weakness. It is training, mental training, emotional training, focus training. Because when you sit in silence, you start to notice things. You notice how quickly your mind looks for distraction, how it jumps from thought to thought, how it replays the past, how it worries about the future. You realize something powerful. Your mind is not calm. It is conditioned to be scattered. And that realization is not failure. It is awareness, because now you can begin to train it. Most people try to improve their life without ever learning how to sit still. Think about that. They want discipline, but they cannot sit in silence for 5 minutes. They want clarity, but they never create space for it. They want focus, but they never practice it. And that's why they stay stuck. Because focus is not something you turn on when needed. It is something you train daily. And solitude is where that training happens. Now, this doesn't mean isolating yourself from the world. It means creating intentional space. Space without noise, without input, without distraction. Even if it's just 10 minutes. 10 minutes where you sit and observe. No phone, no music, no external stimulation, just you. And at first, it will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will resist it. It will tell you to check something, to move, to do anything else. But don't give in. Stay. Because that resistance, that's the exact muscle you need to build. The ability to stay. The ability to be present. The ability to hold your attention. And the more you practice that, the stronger it becomes. You begin to notice your thoughts without getting lost in them. You begin to see patterns without reacting to them. You begin to create space between impulse and action. And in that space, you gain control. Control over your reactions, control over your emotions, control over your focus. That's what makes you dangerous in the best way. Because now, you're not controlled by every thought. You're not pulled by every distraction. You choose, and choice is where power lives. Now let's go deeper. Most people are afraid of being alone because they associate it with loneliness. But those are not the same thing. Loneliness is disconnection. Solitude is connection. Connection with yourself, with your direction, with your truth. And when you build that connection, you stop needing constant external validation. You stop looking for approval. You stop comparing your life to others because you are grounded. You know who you are. You know what you're building. And that clarity removes noise. This is what most people never experience because they are always plugged into something, always consuming, always reacting, never creating space, never listening inward. But you are different now. You are choosing awareness. You are choosing presence. You are choosing growth, and that requires silence. Now here's something powerful to understand. When you are comfortable being alone, you become independent from distraction. You don't need constant entertainment. You don't need approval to feel stable. You don't need noise to feel occupied. And that independence is what allows you to focus deeply. Because focus requires stillness. It requires the ability to sit with one thing without needing something else. And that is rare. In a world designed to pull your attention in every direction, the ability to sit still is a superpower. But like any superpower, it must be trained daily, consistently, intentionally. So here's what I want you to do. Starting today, Create a moment of silence, even if it's short. Sit, breathe, observe. Don't try to fix your thoughts. Don't try to control everything. Just notice, because awareness is the first step to mastery. And over time, that small practice will grow. It will strengthen your focus. It will sharpen your clarity. It will build your control. And you will start to feel something new. Calm. Not the calm of doing nothing, but the calm of being in control, of not being pulled in every direction, of not being overwhelmed by noise, of being centered. And from that place, you can build anything. Now here's the transition. Once you learn to be alone, to observe, to stay present, something else becomes possible. You begin to notice where your time actually goes, not where you think it goes, but where it truly goes. And that awareness leads to the next level. Because focus is not just about attention, it's about time. And most people are losing it without realizing it. That's where Chapter 5 begins. Time is your real currency, because once you see how you spend your time, you will understand exactly why your life looks the way it does. Take a breath, because this next chapter will change how you see every hour of your day. Chapter 5. Time is your real currency. You've been told your whole life that money is valuable, that success is measured by income, that wealth is something you earn, store, and spend. But here's the truth. Most people don't fully understand. Money is replaceable. Time is not. You can lose money and earn it back. You can lose opportunities and create new ones. But the time you waste, it never returns. And yet, most people spend it carelessly, not because they're lazy, but because they're unaware. They don't see time as something they are actively investing. They see it as something that just passes, something that just happens. But time doesn't pass. It gets used. Every hour, every minute, every second, it is being spent, whether you are intentional or not. And that means one thing. Your life is the result of how you spend your time, not what you plan, not what you want, not what you say, what you do with your time. That's the real story. So let's slow this down. Let's make it real. Take your last 24 hours. Break them down honestly. How much time went to growth? How much time went to distraction? How much time went to things that actually moved your life forward? And how much time just disappeared? Scrolling, watching, waiting, avoiding. Be honest. Because this is not about judgment. This is about clarity, and clarity shows you something powerful. Time doesn't lie. It reflects your priorities. If you say your goals matter, but your time says otherwise, then your actions are telling the truth. And that's where change begins. Not in what you say, but in what you're willing to see. Now here's something deeper. Most people don't waste time intentionally. They leak it. Small moments, small distractions, small delays. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, an hour that doesn't matter. But those moments, they compound, they build, they shape your life quietly. And before you realize it, weeks pass, months pass, years pass, and nothing has changed. Not because you didn't want change, but because you didn't protect your time. That's the shift. You don't need more time. You need more awareness of how you use it. Because once you become aware, you become intentional. And intention changes everything. Now think about this. If you treated your time like money, would you spend it the same way? Would you scroll for hours? Would you give it away to things that don't matter? Would you invest it into nothing? Or would you protect it, value it, direct it? Because time is not just a resource, It is your life in motion. Every hour you spend is a piece of your life you will never get back. So the question becomes, are you investing it or are you wasting it? Now let's go deeper. There are two ways people use time. They either consume or they create. Consumers react. They scroll, they watch, they absorb, they wait for things to happen. Creators direct, they build, they act. They move with intention, they create outcomes. And the difference between those two is focus. Because consumption is easy. It requires no effort, no discipline, no direction. But creation requires attention. It requires energy. It requires focus. And that's why most people stay stuck. Because they spend most of their time consuming and very little time creating. But you're not here to stay stuck. You're here to shift, to move from passive to active, from reactive to intentional, from consumer to creator. And that shift starts with one decision: to respect your time, not in a vague way, but in a practical way. That means setting boundaries with your habits, with your environment, with your distractions. It means deciding, this hour is mine. This time is for building. This moment is for growth. And protecting it, not negotiating it, not delaying it, protecting it. Because every time you protect your time, you reinforce your identity. You become someone who values themselves, someone who takes control, someone who moves with purpose. And over time, that builds momentum, momentum that compounds, momentum that accelerates, momentum that transforms your life. Now, here's something powerful. You don't need to change your entire day. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to reclaim 1 hour, one focused hour every day, an hour where you are not distracted, not reactive, not consuming, but building, reading, learning, training, creating, reflecting, improving. 1 hour fully focused. Because 1 hour a day is not just time, it's transformation. It's the difference between drifting and directing, between staying the same and evolving. And over weeks, over months, that hour becomes your advantage. Because while others are distracted, you are building. While others are waiting, you are moving. While others are consuming, you are creating. And that gap grows until one day it becomes impossible to ignore. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, what would happen if you gave yourself one focused hour every day? Not occasionally, not when you feel like it, every day. Where would you be in a month? In 6 months? In a year? That's not motivation, that's math. Because consistency compounds, and time amplifies whatever you do with it. So if you invest it wisely, your life expands. If you waste it carelessly, your life stalls. Simple, but powerful. Now here's the transition. Once you begin to respect your time, something else becomes clear. Not everything deserves your attention. Not every opportunity is valuable. Not every path is worth taking. And that leads to the next level. Because focus is not just about time. It's about direction, knowing where to place your energy, knowing what truly matters, and knowing what to ignore. That's where Chapter 6 begins. Clarity over everything. Because when your direction is clear, distractions lose their power. Take a breath. Because this next chapter will sharpen your vision in a way most people never experience. Chapter 6. Clarity over everything. There is a reason most people feel busy, but not fulfilled. A reason they move all day, but don't move forward. A reason they try harder, but see little change. It's not because they lack effort. It's because they lack clarity. And without clarity, focus becomes impossible. Because if you don't know what truly matters, everything feels important. And when everything feels important, your attention gets scattered, pulled in every direction, drained by everything, directed by nothing. That's how people stay stuck. Not because they're not working, but because they're not working on the right things. Now let's slow this down. Clarity is not about having all the answers. It's about removing confusion. It's about knowing what deserves your time and what doesn't. It's about direction, and direction creates power. Because when your direction is clear, your decisions become easier. You stop overthinking. You stop hesitating. You stop wasting energy on things that don't align. And that alone changes everything. But here's the problem. Most people never take the time to get clear. They jump from one thing to another, one idea, one goal, one distraction, always chasing something new, always reacting, never deciding. And that creates a life of constant motion without real progress, because motion is not the same as direction. You can be busy all day and still go nowhere. So this is where you stop. This is where you pause and ask yourself a question most people avoid. What do I actually want? Not what sounds good, not what other people expect, not what looks impressive. What do you actually want? Be honest. Because clarity doesn't come from surface answers. It comes from truth, from stripping away expectations, from removing noise, from asking yourself, if no one was watching, what would I choose? That question, that's where clarity begins. Now, once you answer that, you go deeper. Why does it matter? Why is that important to you? Because if your why is weak, your focus will be weak. You'll get distracted. You'll quit when things get hard. You'll drift. But when your why is strong, it anchors you. It holds your attention. It keeps you moving. Even when motivation disappears, and motivation will disappear. That's reality. So you cannot rely on it. You must rely on clarity. Because clarity doesn't fade. Clarity doesn't depend on mood. Clarity stays. Now here's the shift. Once you are clear on what you want, you must simplify, not complicate. Simplify. Because most people overwhelm themselves with too much. Too many goals, too many plans, too many directions. And that kills focus. Because focus requires narrowing, choosing fewer things, and doing them better. So instead of asking, what can I add? Start asking, what truly matters most? And then commit to that, fully, without dividing your attention, without constantly switching paths, because every time you switch, you reset your progress, you lose momentum, you weaken your focus. But when you stay consistent, when you stay aligned, you build something powerful, depth, and depth creates mastery. Now, let's make this practical. If you have 5 priorities, you have none. If you're trying to do everything, you are doing nothing well. So choose 1, 2, maybe 3 areas that truly matter and focus on those, not casually, intentionally. Protecting your time, protecting your energy, protecting your attention, because clarity is not just about knowing, it's about committing. Now here's something deeper. Clarity also requires letting go of things that don't align, opportunities that look good, but don't move you forward, habits that feel comfortable, but don't serve your goals, people who distract rather than support. And that's not easy, because letting go always feels like loss. But in reality, it's alignment. It's making space for what actually matters. And that's how focus strengthens. Now think about this. Imagine your attention as a spotlight. Wherever you point it, that's what grows. If you point it at distractions, distractions grow. If you point it at doubt, doubt grows. If you point it at growth, growth expands. So the question becomes, where is your spotlight aimed right now? Not where you want it to be, where it actually is. Because that determines everything. Your progress, your results, your future. And the moment you become aware of that, you can redirect it intentionally, powerfully. Now here's the truth. Clarity is not something you find once and keep forever. It's something you maintain, you revisit, you refine. Because as you grow, your direction evolves, your priorities shift, your understanding deepens. And that's normal. That's part of the process. But the key is you stay intentional. You don't drift. You don't lose awareness. You keep asking yourself, am I aligned with what matters? And if the answer is no, you adjust, not someday, immediately. Because small misalignments become big problems over time, and focus requires correction, constant correction. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, what in my life right now is not aligned with what I truly want? Be honest, because that answer is your next decision. That answer is where your focus needs to shift, and once you act on it, everything begins to sharpen. Your time becomes intentional. Your energy becomes directed. Your actions become meaningful. And your life begins to move with purpose. Now here's the transition. Once you have clarity and you begin to focus your time and eliminate distractions, you face something else, resistance, internal resistance, because your mind is not used to this level of discipline. It will push back. It will look for shortcuts. It will try to pull you back into old habits. And that's where most people break. Not because they lack clarity, but because they don't understand resistance. And that's where Chapter 7 begins. The battle with your own mind. Because the greatest obstacle to your focus is not outside of you, it's inside. Take a breath, because this next chapter will show you how to win that battle. Chapter 7, the battle with your own mind. There is a moment that comes after clarity, after you decide what matters, after you choose to focus. A moment most people don't expect. Resistance, not from the world, not from other people, from within, your own mind. Because your mind is not designed for growth. It is designed for comfort, for safety, for familiarity. And the moment you step outside of what is familiar, it reacts, it questions, it resists. That's why the hardest part of focus is not starting. It's continuing. Because starting feels exciting, new, motivating, but continuing requires discipline. And discipline challenges your mind. Now let's understand this clearly. Your mind has patterns, habit loops, ways of thinking that it repeats automatically. And those patterns are built over time, through repetition, through comfort, through avoidance. So when you try to change, you're not just making a decision, you're going against a system that has been running for years. And that system doesn't change quietly. It fights back. It tells you things like, this is too hard. You can start tomorrow. You deserve a break. This isn't necessary. And those thoughts feel real. They feel convincing because they come from you. But here's the truth. Not every thought you have deserves to be followed. And that realization changes everything. Because most people don't question their thoughts. They obey them automatically, without awareness, without resistance, and that's why they stay stuck. Because Their mind is leading them, not the other way around, but you're here to reverse that, to take control, to lead your mind instead of being led by it. And that starts with awareness, the ability to notice your thoughts without immediately acting on them. Because once you notice them, you create space, and in that space, you gain choice. Choice to act differently, choice to stay focused, choice to move forward. Now let's make this real. Imagine you sit down to do something important, something that moves your life forward. Within minutes, your mind starts. Check your phone. This can wait. You're tired. Do it later. And in the past, you followed those thoughts without questioning them. But now, you pause, you observe, you recognize. This is resistance, not truth, not reality, resistance. And that changes your response. Instead of reacting, you choose, you stay, you continue. And that small moment, that small decision is where discipline is built. Not in big actions, not in dramatic changes, in small moments of resistance, where you choose growth over comfort again and again and again, because discipline is not a trait. It is a practice, a repetition of decisions. And every time you choose focus, you strengthen it. Every time you resist distraction, you build control. Every time you continue, despite resistance, you rewire your mind. That's how change happens. Not instantly, but consistently. Now here's something deeper. Resistance never disappears. It evolves. At every level, there is a new version of it. When you start, it tells you to quit. When you progress, it tells you to slow down. When you improve, it tells you you've done enough. And if you're not aware, you will listen. You will stop. You will settle. And that's how people plateau. Not because they can't grow, but because they stop pushing. Because they listen to resistance. But now you know. Now you recognize it. Now you see it for what it is. A test of your focus, a test of your discipline, a test of your commitment. And every time you pass that test, you become stronger, more focused, more controlled. Now let's go even deeper. Your mind is like a muscle. If you let it do whatever it wants, it becomes weak, undisciplined, reactive. But if you train it, if you challenge it, if you push it, it becomes sharp, controlled, resilient, and that's what you're building. A trained mind, a focused mind, a mind that works for you, not against you. And that takes repetition, daily repetition, because one day of focus doesn't change your life, but consistent focus does. So don't expect it to feel easy. Don't expect it to feel natural right away. Expect resistance. Welcome it, because it means you are growing. It means you are stepping outside your old patterns. It means you are becoming something new. Now pause for a moment and think about this. How many times have you stopped because your mind told you to? How many opportunities have you delayed because you listened to resistance? And how different would your life be if you didn't? That's the shift, not eliminating resistance, but overcoming it consistently. Because every time you do, you move forward. And over time, that movement becomes momentum, and momentum becomes transformation. Now here's the transition. Once you begin to win the battle with your mind, something else becomes possible. Consistency. Because focus is not about intensity, it's about repetition. Doing the right things again and again until they become part of who you are. And that's where Chapter 8 begins. The power of showing up daily. Because the difference between average and unstoppable is not talent, it's consistency. Take a breath. because this next chapter will change how you approach every single day. Chapter 8, The Power of Showing Up Daily. There is a lie that sounds motivating, but quietly destroys progress. The lie is this: you just need one big moment, one big push, one burst of motivation, one perfect plan, and everything will change. But real life doesn't work like that. Real change is not built in big moments. It's built in small ones, repeated, daily, quietly, without applause. Because what you do once does not define you. What you do consistently does. And that is where most people break. Not because they lack ambition, not because they lack potential, but because they lack consistency. They start strong. They feel inspired. They take action for a few days, maybe a week. And then they slow down. They miss a day, then another. Then they stop completely. Not because they chose to quit, but because they stopped showing up. And that's how progress disappears. Not suddenly, but gradually, through inconsistency. So this chapter is simple, but powerful. You don't need to do more. You need to show up every day, even when it's boring, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, because that is where discipline is built. Now let's be clear. Showing up daily does not mean being perfect. It does not mean performing at your best every time. It means being present. It means taking action, no matter how small, because small actions stack. They build momentum, and momentum creates transformation. Think about this. If you improve just 1% every day, what happens over time? You don't notice it immediately, but weeks later, months later, you are different, stronger, sharper, more disciplined, not because of one big effort, but because of consistent effort. That's the power of daily action. Now, here's something important. Consistency is not exciting. It's not glamorous. It doesn't give instant results. And that's why most people don't stick with it. They want fast progress, quick rewards, immediate change. But real growth is slow, steady, invisible at first. And if you don't understand that, you will quit before it shows. You will stop before it compounds. You will leave before it transforms you. So you must shift your mindset. Stop chasing results. Start committing to the process, because the process is what creates results. And when you focus on showing up, instead of chasing outcomes, you remove pressure. You remove frustration. You remove the need for perfection. You just act daily. And that changes everything. Now let's go deeper. There will be days when you don't feel like doing anything. Days when your energy is low. Days when your mind is tired. Days when everything feels heavy. And those are the days that matter most. Because anyone can show up when it's easy, when it feels good, when motivation is high. But showing up when it's hard, that's discipline. That's identity. That's what separates people who grow from people who stay the same. Because every time you show up on a hard day, you send a message to yourself. I don't depend on how I feel. I follow through. I am consistent. And that message builds confidence, real confidence, not the kind you talk about, the kind you earn through action, through repetition, through proof. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to win every day. You just need to not quit. That's it. Because progress is not about being perfect. It's about staying in the game, staying consistent, staying focused, even when it's slow, even when it's quiet, even when no one sees it, because that's where real growth happens, in the unseen moments, in the small decisions, in the daily effort. Now think about this. What would your life look like if you committed to showing up every day for 1 year, not perfectly, not intensely, consistently? Where would you be? How different would you feel? How much stronger would your focus be? That's not a fantasy. That's a result. And it's available to you, not through talent, not through luck, through consistency. Now, let's make this practical. Choose one area of your life that matters, one, not 10, one, and commit to showing up daily. It could be your health, your learning, your work, your mindset, anything that builds you, and then remove the excuses. Remove the negotiation. Remove the option to skip. You show up every day, no matter what. And over time, that becomes part of who you are. You don't question it. You don't debate it. You just do it. And that's when it becomes powerful. Because now, you are not relying on motivation. You are relying on identity, and identity is stable. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't disappear. It stays. Now here's the transition. Once you begin to show up daily, something changes. Your confidence grows. Your focus strengthens. Your discipline becomes natural. And you start to trust yourself. And that trust is everything. Because when you trust yourself, you stop hesitating. You stop doubting. You stop waiting. You act with clarity, with purpose, with certainty. And that leads us to the next level, because showing up daily builds something deeper, self-trust, and without it, focus will always break. That's where Chapter 9 begins. Become someone you can trust, because the strongest form of focus comes from believing in your own consistency. Take a breath, because this next chapter will change how you see yourself. Chapter 9. Become someone you can trust. There is something deeper than motivation, stronger than discipline, more powerful than temporary focus, self-trust. And most people don't realize they've been breaking it for years, quietly, consistently. Every time you say you'll do something and don't, you weaken it. Every time you set a goal and abandon it, you damage it. Every time you promise yourself change and go back to old habits, you erode it. And over time, something dangerous happens. You stop believing yourself. You stop trusting your own words. You stop relying on your own decisions. And when that happens, focus becomes fragile. Because how can you stay consistent if you don't believe you will? Now, let's slow this down. Think about your own life. How many times have you said, I'll start tomorrow. I'll be more disciplined. I'll stay focused this time. And then didn't follow through? Be honest. Because this is not about guilt. This is about awareness. Every broken promise leaves a mark, not visible, but real. And those marks add up. Until one day, you hesitate. Not because you don't want to change, but because you don't believe you will. That's the hidden cost. And that's why self-trust is everything. Because when you trust yourself, your actions become powerful. Your decisions become solid. Your focus becomes stable. You don't second guess. You don't hesitate. You move. Now here's the shift. Self-trust is not built through words. It's built through evidence, through action, through consistency, through doing what you said you would do, again and again and again. No shortcuts, no exceptions, no negotiation, because every time you follow through, you strengthen that trust. You prove to yourself, I can rely on me, and that changes everything. Now let's make this practical. Stop making big promises. Stop setting unrealistic expectations, because every time you fail to meet them, you damage your trust. Instead, start small, but be consistent. If you say, I will focus for 1 hour, then do it, no matter what. If you say, I will wake up at this time, then do it, no matter what. If you say, I will complete this task today, then do it, no matter what. Because it's not about the size of the action, it's about the consistency of the follow-through. That's what builds trust. Now, here's something important. You don't build self-trust in big moments. You build it in small ones, in the moments when no one is watching, in the moments when it's easy to skip, in the moments when it would be comfortable to quit. And you don't. You follow through, and those moments, they stack, they compound, they create a foundation of reliability, a foundation of discipline, a foundation of focus. And once that foundation is strong, everything else becomes easier, because now you don't rely on motivation, you rely on yourself. Now, let's go deeper. When you trust yourself, you remove doubt, not completely, but significantly, because doubt comes from uncertainty, from inconsistency, from past failures to follow through. But when you consistently act, when you consistently show up, when you consistently do what you say, doubt loses its power, because now you have proof that you can act, proof that you can stay focused, proof that you can follow through, and proof is stronger than emotion, stronger than fear, stronger than hesitation. Now think about this. How would your life change if you fully trusted yourself? If when you said something, you knew it would happen? If when you made a decision, you followed through without question? That's not confidence, that's certainty. And certainty creates momentum, because you stop wasting energy on doubt. You stop overthinking. You stop delaying. You just act. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Now here's the truth. You cannot fake self-trust. You cannot talk your way into it. You cannot think your way into it. You must earn it through action, through repetition, through consistency, every day. And that's the work. That's the real work. Not big goals, not big plans, small actions, done consistently. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, do I trust myself? Not in general, in action, in follow-through, in consistency. Be honest, because that answer is your starting point. If the answer is no, that's not failure, that's awareness. And awareness gives you the opportunity to rebuild, one action at a time, one promise at a time, one day at a time. And over time, that trust grows, stronger, deeper, unshakable. And once it's there, focus becomes natural, because you don't question your actions. You execute them. Now here's the transition. Once you trust yourself, you gain something even more powerful: control over your environment, because your environment shapes your behavior, shapes your focus, shapes your results. And most people are living in environments that work against them without even realizing it. That's where Chapter 10 begins. Design your environment for focus. Because if your environment is working against you, focus will always feel like a fight. Take a breath, because this next chapter will show you how to make focus easier by changing what surrounds you. Chapter 10. Design your environment for focus. There is something most people underestimate, something silent, something invisible, something that shapes their behavior every single day. Their environment, not their intentions, not their goals. Their environment, because here's the truth. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your environment. If your environment is full of distractions, you will be distracted. If your environment encourages laziness, you will feel lazy. If your environment pulls your attention in every direction, your focus will break. Not because you are weak, but because your surroundings are stronger than your willpower. And that's what most people miss. They try to fix their discipline. Without fixing what surrounds them, they try to force focus in environments designed for distraction, and then they blame themselves. But this is not about blame. This is about awareness. Because once you understand this, you gain control. Now think about your daily environment, your phone, your workspace, your room, your digital space. What do they encourage? Focus or distraction? Growth or comfort? Because every detail matters. The notifications on your phone, the apps you open automatically, the clutter on your desk, the people you interact with, the content you consume. They are not neutral. They are shaping you every single day. So if you want to become focused, you don't just change yourself. You change your environment. You design it to support the person you want to become. Now let's make this practical. Start with your phone, the biggest source of distraction for most people. Ask yourself, how often do you reach for it without thinking? How often do you open apps automatically? How much time disappears there? Be honest. Because this is where your focus leaks the most. So what do? You remove friction from focus and add friction to distraction. You delete apps you don't need. You turn off unnecessary notifications. You move distracting apps out of reach. You create boundaries, not because you lack discipline, but because you respect your attention. Now move to your physical space, your workspace, your room. Is it clean, organized, or cluttered? Because clutter creates noise, visual noise, mental noise, and that noise affects your focus. So simplify. Remove what you don't need. Keep only what supports your work. Create a space that signals focus. That tells your mind, this is where I build. Because environment creates cues, and cues create behavior. Now let's go deeper. Your environment is not just physical, it's also social. The people around you, the conversations you engage in, the energy you absorb. Ask yourself, do the people around me support my growth? Or do they distract me from it? Because people influence your focus more than you realize. Their habits become your habits. Their mindset affects your mindset. Their priorities shape your priorities. So you must be intentional. Not everyone deserves access to your time. Not every conversation deserves your energy. And that's not arrogance, that's focus. Because if you surround yourself with distraction, you will struggle to stay focused. But if you surround yourself with growth, focus becomes natural. Now here's something important. Designing your environment is not about perfection. It's about alignment. Creating a space that makes the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. Because willpower is limited, but environment is constant. So instead of relying on willpower, you build systems, you create conditions where focus becomes the default. Now think about this. If your phone didn't distract you, if your space was clean, if your environment supported your goals, how much easier would focus feel? How much less resistance would you face? That's the power of environment. It removes friction. It supports discipline. It reinforces identity. Now, here's the deeper layer. Your environment is a reflection of your standards. If you tolerate clutter, you tolerate distraction. If you tolerate noise, you tolerate lack of focus. If you tolerate chaos, you tolerate inconsistency. But the moment you raise your standards, your environment changes. And when your environment changes, your behavior follows. So this is not just about cleaning your space. It's about upgrading your standards. Deciding, I don't allow distractions to control me. I don't allow chaos to shape my focus. I create an environment that supports my growth. And then acting on it. Because action is what makes it real. Now pause for a moment. Look around your space, your phone, your environment, and ask yourself, is this helping me become who I want to be? If the answer is no, you know what to do. Not tomorrow, now. Because small changes create big shifts. Remove one distraction, clean one space, set one boundary, and build from there. Because focus is not built in one moment. It is built through consistent alignment between you and your environment. Now here's the transition. Once your environment supports your focus, something else becomes clear. You have fewer excuses, less resistance, more control. And now it's time to go deeper, because focus is not just external. It's internal. It's emotional. And your emotions can either strengthen your focus or destroy it. That's where Chapter 11 begins. Control your emotions, control your focus. Because if your emotions control you, your focus will never be stable. Take a breath, because this next chapter will show you how to stay grounded, even when everything inside you wants to react. Chapter 11. Control your emotions. Control your focus. There is something even stronger than distraction. Something more powerful than your environment. Something that can break your focus instantly. Your emotions. Not because emotions are bad, but because most people are controlled by them. They don't realize it. They don't see it. But it's happening constantly. You wake up feeling low, and your whole day slows down. You feel stressed, and your focus disappears. You feel overwhelmed, and you avoid everything. You feel frustrated, and you quit early. It's not the situation, it's your reaction to it. And that reaction is emotional. Now, here's the truth. You cannot control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you respond. And that response determines your focus. Because focus requires stability. It requires consistency. It requires the ability to stay on track, even when you don't feel like it. And that's where most people fail. They let emotions decide their actions instead of letting decisions guide their emotions. So their focus becomes unstable, unpredictable, dependent on how they feel. And feelings change constantly. That's why you cannot rely on them. Now let's slow this down. Think about the last time you lost focus. Was it because you didn't know what to do? Or was it because you didn't feel like doing it? Be honest. Because most of the time, it's not confusion. It's emotion. You knew exactly what needed to be done, but you didn't feel like doing it. And instead of acting anyway, you followed the feeling. That's the pattern, and that's what must change. Because if you let emotions lead, your life will always be inconsistent. But if you learn to lead your emotions, your life becomes stable. Now, this doesn't mean ignoring emotions. It doesn't mean suppressing them. It means understanding them, observing them, and choosing your response. Because emotions are signals, not commands. They tell you something, but they don't decide for you. You decide. And that's where control begins. Now let's make this practical. You sit down to focus, and suddenly you feel restless, bored, unmotivated. In the past, that feeling would stop you. You would leave, delay, switch tasks. But now, you pause. you recognize this is just a feeling, not a reason, not a command, just a temporary state. And instead of reacting, you stay, you continue, and something interesting happens. The feeling passes, because emotions are temporary. They rise, they peak, they fade. But if you react to them immediately, you reinforce them. You make them stronger. You train your mind to follow them. And that's how you lose control. But when you observe them without reacting, you weaken them. You build control. You strengthen focus, and that's the shift. Now let's go deeper. There are certain emotions that destroy focus faster than anything else. Overwhelm, stress, doubt, frustration. And they all have one thing in common. They pull your attention away from action. They trap you in thinking, overthinking, replaying, worrying. And while you're stuck there, nothing moves. So the key is not to eliminate those emotions, but to move through them quickly without getting stuck. Now here's a powerful method. When you feel overwhelmed, don't think more. Simplify. Break things down. Focus on one small action. Because overwhelm comes from trying to hold too much at once. But clarity comes from narrowing your focus. So instead of asking, how do I do everything? Ask, what is the next step? And take it. That's how you move forward. Now when you feel doubt, don't argue with it. Don't try to eliminate it. Act anyway. Because action weakens doubt. Every time you act despite doubt, you prove it wrong. You build confidence, and confidence comes from action, not thinking. Now when you feel frustration, pause. Don't react immediately, because frustration often leads to poor decisions. Take a breath, reset, and then continue, because reacting emotionally will always break your focus, but responding intentionally will strengthen it. Now here's something deeper. Emotional control is not about being calm all the time. It's about being stable, consistent, grounded, even when things are difficult, even when things don't go your way, even when progress is slow. Because that stability is what allows you to stay focused, to keep moving, to not get thrown off track. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Not perfection, stability. Now think about this. How many times have your emotions pulled you away from what matters? How many times have you stopped because of how you felt? And how different would your life be if you didn't? That's the shift. Not eliminating emotions, but mastering your response to them. Because once you do, focus becomes stronger, more stable, more reliable. Now here's the transition. Once you control your emotions and your environment supports your focus and you trust yourself to follow through, you reach another level. Deep work. The ability to focus for long periods without distraction, without interruption, without losing intensity. And that is rare. That is powerful. That is where real progress happens. That's where Chapter 12 begins. Enter deep focus mode, because shallow attention creates average results. But deep focus creates extraordinary ones. Take a breath, because this next chapter will show you how to access a level of focus most people never reach. Chapter 12. Enter deep focus mode. There is a level of focus most people never reach. Not because they can't, but because they never train for it. They live in fragments, short bursts of attention, constant interruptions, quick switches between tasks, always starting, rarely finishing, and over time, their mind adapts to that pattern. Shallow, reactive, easily distracted. That becomes their default, and they don't even notice it because it feels normal. But normal is not effective. Normal is why most people stay average, because average focus creates average results. But deep focus, that's different. Deep focus is when your attention locks in, when distractions fade, when time feels different, when you are fully present with one thing. And in that state, your work changes, your thinking sharpens, your output improves, your progress accelerates, because depth creates quality. Now let's understand this clearly. Deep focus is not something you wait for. It's something you create intentionally, through structure, through discipline, through repetition, because your mind needs to be trained for it. Now think about your current pattern. How often do you switch tasks? How often do you check your phone? How often do you interrupt yourself without even realizing it? Be honest, because every interruption breaks your focus. And when focus breaks, it takes time to rebuild. That's why shallow work feels busy, but produces little, because you're constantly restarting, constantly losing momentum, constantly rebuilding attention. But deep work removes that. It allows you to stay in one state for long periods, and that's where real progress happens. Now here's how you begin. You create blocks, focus time blocks, not vague, not open-ended, clear, defined, protected. For example, 1 hour, no distractions, no phone, no switching, just one task. Fully. And during that hour, you commit, no matter what. Even if it feels hard, even if your mind resists, even if it feels slow, you stay. Because deep focus requires commitment. It requires staying past the point of comfort. Now here's what happens. At first, it feels difficult. Your mind will try to escape. It will look for distractions. It will create excuses because it's not used to this. But if you stay, something shifts. Your mind settles. Your attention stabilizes. Your focus deepens. And suddenly, you are in it. Fully. That's the state. That's deep focus. And once you experience it, you realize something powerful. You are capable of more than you thought. Now here's the key. You don't need hours and hours. You need quality. Even 1 hour of deep focus is more powerful than 5 hours of distraction. Because depth amplifies effort. It multiplies results. And that's how you move faster. Not by doing more, but by doing deeper. Now let's go deeper. There are 3 things that destroy deep focus: distractions, multitasking, and interruptions. Distractions pull your attention away. Multitasking divides your attention. Interruptions reset your attention. And all 3 keep you shallow. So your job is simple. Remove them. Create an environment where deep focus is possible. Phone away, notifications off, clear space, single task, because every detail matters. Now here's something important. Deep focus is not just about work, it's about presence. Being fully engaged in whatever you're doing, whether it's learning, building, thinking, creating, even resting, because when you are fully present, you experience more, you understand more, you grow more, and that's what focus really is. Presence. Now here's the deeper layer. Deep focus builds identity, because every time you enter that state, you prove something to yourself. I can concentrate. I can stay. I can go deeper. And that builds confidence, not surface confidence, real confidence, the kind that comes from experience, from proof, from doing, and that confidence spills into everything else. Now think about this. What would happen if you entered deep focus every day, even for 1 hour? How much more would you accomplish? How much faster would you grow? How much stronger would your mind become? That's not a question. That's a transformation waiting to happen. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, When was the last time I truly focused? Not partially, not distracted, fully. If you can't remember, that's your starting point. Because this skill, this ability, will change everything. Now here's the transition. Once you begin to access deep focus, you notice something else. Not everything deserves that level of attention. Some things are simply noise. And learning to ignore that noise is just as important as learning to focus. That's where Chapter 13 begins. Ignore what doesn't matter, because your power is not just in what you focus on, but in what you refuse to give attention to. Take a breath, because this next chapter will teach you how to protect your focus by mastering what you ignore. Chapter 13. Ignore what doesn't matter. Focus is not just about what you choose, it is about what you refuse, because every moment your attention is being pulled. Notifications, opinions, messages, trends, noise, endless noise, and most of it does not matter. But if you don't decide that, if you don't define that, everything starts to feel important. And when everything feels important, you lose your direction, you lose your clarity, you lose your power. Because attention is limited, you cannot give it to everything and still expect to grow. So the real skill is not just focusing harder, it is ignoring better. Now let's be real. There are things in your life right now that are stealing your attention, not because they are valuable, but because they are available, easy to access, easy to consume, easy to fall into, and that's how they win. Not through importance, but through accessibility. Think about it. How often do you check things that don't actually improve your life? How often do you get pulled into conversations that go nowhere? How often do you react to things that don't deserve your energy? Be honest, because this is where your focus leaks. Not in big moments, in small ones, repeated, daily. Now here's the truth. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your time. But if you don't consciously decide that, you will react to everything. And that reaction will drain you slowly, consistently, until your focus is gone. So you must become selective, deliberately selective, with what you allow into your mind. Because your mind is shaped by what you consume. Every video, every conversation, every piece of content, it leaves an imprint. It influences your thinking, your mood, your direction, and if you are not aware, you will absorb everything and become scattered. That's why ignoring is a skill, a powerful one, because it protects your focus. It protects your clarity. It protects your energy. Now let's go deeper. Ignoring is not avoidance. It is intentional selection. It is deciding, this does not serve me. This does not align with my direction. This does not deserve my attention. And then acting on that decision without guilt. Now here's the deeper layer. Silence also protects your energy, because when you stop explaining, you stop wasting energy. When you stop seeking validation, you stop depending on others. When you stop sharing everything, you keep your focus intact. And that energy, that saved energy, goes back into your growth, into your focus, into your progress, and that creates acceleration. Now here's the transition. Once you begin to work in silence and build in private, something changes. Your confidence becomes internal. Your focus becomes stable. Your discipline becomes natural. And now, you are no longer dependent on external factors. You are self-directed. And that is where real power begins. But there is one more layer, one more level. Because even with focus, even with discipline, even with clarity, there is something that can still break you: burnout. And that's where Chapter 16 begins. Balance focus with recovery. Because if you don't learn how to recover, your focus will collapse under pressure. Take a breath, because this next chapter will teach you how to sustain your focus without destroying yourself in the process.